The Diary of a Certified Psychopath. Off the crank. Not built for this, the bike or the rider. Time was when this route, or one of a similarly straight and safe nature, would feel like getting away with something far less strenuous than the intervallic pilgrimage of aerobic attrition that your self-appointed clinical psychologist prescribed at least once every 30-day month. To repay your CO2 debt to the tangled weeds, tumbled foliage, towering wooden wiseacres, and every other plant-based life form whose second-hand oxygen you've been liberally ingesting throughout every one of those zone sub-zero slackfests. Today, as I bailed off Sussex's overcast coast after barely 15 minutes on the perceived precipice of pulmonary implosion, after having negotiated a crawling procession of crestfallen commuters whose informed choice of carb-conscious conveyance remained incapacitated by the sheer weight of Britain's buckling transport system, it felt as though I could barely keep pace with the potholes their humming hybrids rattled over, let alone one wind-aided rollerblader I slithered past after veering up a slip lane and onto the meagre confines of Lancing's pebble-dashed Cychopath. At least all this voluntary sufferance yielded enhanced velocity by my donning the most drag-efficient garb I had since my last venture to Worthing's branch of Morrison's, in the form of Raffa's long-discontinued aerosuit. The patent-pending waffle-print lining of this fashionable innovation, a purported stitch-up of 2 items from the now legacy premium brand's Pro-Team collection, more than served its sweat-wicking purposes throughout 15 intolerably toilsome kilometres. From Professor Polar's elbow-mounted and historically accurate vantage point, this open-ended TT was sensorially verified as a 30-minute VO2 vortex, averaging at 90% of my long-term peak pulse, which hasn't flinched a beat since it was set during one lung-busting ascent of Coldine Lane in 2013. Silver light sans solar sight was the recurrent scriptural phrase that echoed from deep within a dense patchwork of goose-down duvets, drifting over Shoreham's tranquil peninsula as I rolled ruefully back to base on an unlogged and all too literal cool-off, with the usual compostable pannier of provisions dangling from my supple steed's left horn, hoping that, having been starved of his staple gravel diet, he wouldn't try to munch through 2 organic granola bars and several packs of ethically crushed walnuts. The day after. When you feel like someone's used your head to squash butternuts and tied a reef knot in your esophagus. When you realise you've left your formally designated foul-weather bike out on a late spring British night that is frigid enough to necessitate wearable loft insulation as mortal proof against a meteorologically invisible chill. When you then find out that this is long enough for a baby snail to have sought extra shelter within the corrugated rubber sheath protecting this venerable vintage trailblazer's elastomer-based rear shock absorber. When a large part of your soul wishes you could be that snail and slide discreetly back to bed beneath a fair trade woolen blanket. When you discover you're fresh out of wet chain lube, due to using your existing supply as emergency fairy liquid substitute, and after expending the last drop of real fairy liquid as lazy floor polish to slide a newly purchased fridge freezer into place without scraping the kitchen tiles. When you idly roll past an absolute dead ringer for the long-deceased composer Sergei Rachmaninoff, wheeling out their overloaded recycling bins in one of your hometown's secluded cul-de-sacs, but fail to snap a pic before they've vanished from view. When you think about utilising one in an exponential choice of AI-powered content creation platforms to falsely render the referenced lookalike within an empty photo taken after the fact, but then decide against it because frankly That's bloody cheating. Yeah, when life smothers you with palpable worries, painful dilemmas and petty stress. Just slow with the flow.